And just going to do a brief introduction for Reverend Linda because I think everybody that's on today knows her well. Let's just briefly go over some of the reasons that she's an important person to listen to. She's an award-winning New Thought author, Unity minister. Um, she has a message that promotes humanity's innate capacities with which to respond to life's circumstances and spiritual maturity. Now, there is a goal that is um, at, good for our times, probably all times, but particularly now for me. She's retired from the executive team at the Unity World headquarters and Silent Unity. Years prior, Reverend Linda served Unity communities in Omaha, Nebraska, and San Antonio, Texas. So, without further ado, Reverend Linda, what do you have to say today?
Good morning, friends. Shout out to all the dads and to those who are thinking about your dads who feel appreciation for anyone in your life who has been a father-like presence for you, just to feel that sense of appreciation. Today's message is about divine wisdom, and I'll speak more about that as we get going. But let's begin with a meditation experience first. I take my inspiration for the whole message and really for this meditation from Isaiah chapter 30. I don't always quote scripture. You probably know that about me. I mean, it's not prevalent, but this verse in scripture has always really moved me and reminded me of where my power is. It says, "And when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left, your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" Couldn't be more clear to pay attention to divine wisdom, to the inner knowing. And that's what we'll meditate upon. So I invite you to just assume your posture for prayer, whatever is comfortable for you. You can turn off your video if you want to, just to be with yourself, whichever is comfortable. And I invite you as we begin to make some space, right, to create a spaciousness in your imagination, to open to infinity. Designate this as a time and a space that is sacred. And let that opening emerge from your breathing. Draw that breath so deeply and intentionally that you feel the vitalizing, refreshing power of the breath in every cell of your body. Expanding your sense of what you are and what God is, what the nature of reality is through your breath, the very breath of life. Opening your mind, choosing to devote your attention to all that is, to infinite power and presence. And opening your heart, centralizing and concentrating divine power right here where I am. Mm. And once we open, we have access to infinity, to universal principle, to ever-present power. And so the invitation now is to describe for yourself just one aspect of the indescribable all, and name it today for the purposes of this experience. Name it wisdom. Wisdom. The infinite power that is accessible in any moment that we just turn within and we invite ourselves to know truth. So affirm for yourself that I recognize wisdom all around me in the atmosphere of infinite intelligence. I recognize wisdom within me as my very own guidance system. Mm. And affirm the truth of integrating your human and your spiritual identities as one by saying to yourself, declaring spiritually, I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward. I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward. Repeat that. Let it be a voice of authority that you deliver into your brain, your nervous system, your muscles, bones, and organs, into every part of you, physical and immaterial. Hmm. I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward, never without a sense of direction. And sit for a moment in the silence of this awareness. I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward. Affirming I am divine wisdom, I can tell by the way I feel whether I'm moving ahead by that power, whether I am discerning the way to go, relying upon an inner sense of direction rather than other people's opinions, for example, or even my own fears and hesitations. When I am embodying divine wisdom, I can easily distinguish between a true sense of direction and false hope or wishful thinking. So, just for a moment, as your own way of realizing the power of wisdom, making it real, think about a situation, that you've been trying to make a decision about, or you've been putting off making it, something that's a dilemma or, unfinished business, and just hold it up gently in your awareness, removing any veil of confusion or even unwillingness, and just sit with this situation, just trusting, I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward. Trusting now that some divine wisdom, I am always able to connect to a sense of direction. So take a deep breath around this understanding. I am divine wisdom, knowing the way forward. Well, recently I officiated a funeral. It had been a while since I'd done so. It was here, down where I live in Siesta Key, Florida. The deceased woman's daughter approached me after the chapel service to say, and she was like really excited to tell me this, that throughout the entire service, she saw a red robin sitting on the windowsill just across from the podium where I and others had been speaking. To her, it was very clear it signified her mother's presence. Later, at the graveside, in the shelter surrounded in the distance by lots of trees, birds were singing it all the way through the military honors and followed by my ministerial remarks. You know this, that hummingbirds and other fowl have throughout history been associated with deceased humans, presumed to now be soaring in the spiritual realm, appearing to loved ones. Maybe you can recall some moments when something appeared that you recognized as a significant symbol for a loved one, or maybe even for confirmation of something that you've been thinking about, trying to mull over. I had such an event. I'm going all the way back to when I was 19 years of age, because this was such a startling experience for me and one of the first of its kind, right? So at the age of 19, I was driving home after dark on a highway in Newark, New Jersey. I had just attended a session in a series of extrasensory perception, ESP, right? Remember, I was definitely hippie girl, right? So my instructor, listen to her name. It was Ernestine Knipschild. Now, is that a name you'd associate with a psychic or what? It was just perfect, right? Well, Ernestine had led us through some past life regressions and other fascinating features of the occult. But driving home, I was feeling a little unsure of all of this that I was experiencing for the very first time. If you know anything about me, I came from a very traditional family, right? An Italian Catholic family. And if you know them, you know, I don't have to say much more besides that. But I had no exposure to belief systems outside of the one true church, Roman Catholicism. So my mind is blown, right? And I'm driving, wondering whether I was heading in the right direction. And that was not metaphorical. I mean, it was not materially, it was metaphorically, right? Well, as soon as I had that clear thought of questioning, within seconds, I saw right outside the driver's side window and up in the sky the first and only shooting star I've ever encountered. Now, to say that I saw a shooting star doesn't really describe what happened. It wasn't just a sighting, it was a visceral experience. Shooting star travel into the crown of my head, down the back of my spine, and then shoot right back out and up again. I was so startled that I was trying to pull over to the side of the highway, right? And I was turning my head to kind of gauge where I needed to go. The instant I turned my head, I had a spontaneous chiropractic adjustment. Every single vertebra clicked into alignment. I never experienced anything like it. And I felt suddenly amazingly wonderful. I mean, there was any little twitch of physical discomfort or tension was gone. And so, I pull over, I'm sitting there like trying to make sense of this, trying to collect myself. And all I could feel was this sense of deep peace, like an answer to my concern that was saying, I don't know if this is the right direction. I felt, of course, now inspired to continue studying and to seek a whole path of spirituality. I was so inspired. I started my spiritual journey at 19, you could say. Well, during this same time period, I was attending my first yoga class. And this again was nothing I had ever experienced. Um, but a colleague of mine that I was working with invited me to her class, and I invited her to mine. So she came to my ESP class. I went to her yoga class. Well, I had no idea what to expect. So back then we didn't have images for that, right? I walked into this classroom in a local high school or college, I don't remember, and immediately I could hear the sitar music that was on the CD player. Then I could smell the Nag Champa incense that was permeating the space. There was a little petite little Indian woman with a long braid down the back of her neck and her traditional clothing. And she had a tilak, the red dot over her third eye, and she's namasteing. And, I'm like, whoa. And she pointed to one of the yoga mats that was right there on the floor. So I sat down and did what everyone else did. I crossed my legs and sat up. The instant I sat on that mat and crossed my legs, I had a flash of myself in an ochre robe with a bald head, which I have today, but I didn't have back then, right? I had no knowledge of this tradition. This made no sense to me, but it got my attention, and like, I was transfixed. I was transfixed. Only in sharing it later with the teacher did I fathom that I was inspired by an unfamiliar but resonant spiritual path. And who knows, maybe having a past life flashback. You know, I don't know how I feel about incarnation, even reincarnation, even today. But the point of it is that I felt connected, aligned, and inspired. I would go on to study yoga and enter an ashram, a Kripalu yoga ashram, and lived there for 3 years until I left to marry Giles and forge a future steeped in spiritual awareness, that is so to this day. I just point to these mystical experiences in my early adulthood because they led to a profoundly different life than I could have imagined for myself. Perhaps you've wondered, as I have from time to time, what would be different about my life today had I not taken that path? But of course, I've piled on enough years to kind of know that that's pretty futile to just speculate. But it does remind me of something that the 19th century Austrian novelist René Rilke, you might be familiar with some of his quotations. I love this. He said, "If I don't manage to fly, someone else will. The spirit only wants that there be flying. As for who happens to do it, in that spirit only has a passing interest." So, for me, it was just all like, okay, I'm on this path. I could have been on a different path, but here I am. Let me be wholeheartedly in this one that I have chosen. But speaking of birds and flying and inspiration and divine ideas, I want to tell you something about my dad. Now, this wasn't particular to Father's Day, but he certainly is in my heart today. He died February a year ago, so just recently, really. And you might have known from me speaking about it before, I don't know, but my dad was a stained glass artist, right? And at the age of 87, he was not finished making them. He would sit in his shower shop, he called it, in the bathroom in his assisted living apartment, in the shower stall, because he couldn't stand to get a shower because he was in a wheelchair full time. They set up a folding table inside the stall, and he would wheel up to that, and he had his stained glass laboratory all there. And every single day he worked on pieces until the week before he died at age 94. So 87, he was still a young buck, at least in terms of the number of pieces he made. Well, after I joined Silent Unity in early 2017, my dad made a replica of the cupola above the prayer vigil chapel at Unity Village, where it sits in the window of that chapel to this very day. So Kyle agreed to put on screen 2 snapshots of this stained glass panel. The one has the light behind it, and the other one, you can see the way it looks at dusk. The amber lights are actually in those windows, and so at dusk and after nightfall, those amber lights just pop out from that cupola. What a beautiful piece of a legacy piece, really. Um, but Dad told me that he had had a surprise. So just keep them up for a second here. He said, I added a surprise for you. So when I received the package and unveiled it, I found, and you'll see them on here, Dad had painted birds around the cupola. Now, my Roman Catholic dad would have no way of knowing the significance of birds in unity, right? That birds represent divine ideas, inspirational thoughts, right? Messages for us. How amazing is it that dad had been inspired to add them? In fact, my dad would dream solutions and ideas for his panels, and he had dreamt of the idea of putting birds in the sky around the cupola. Is that awesome? Is that awesome? Okay, you can put the images down if you'd like to. So, but speaking again of birds and flying and inspiration and divine ideas, here's what I've come to know and understand. One, it's always raining divine ideas. They're always there. They're in the field of infinite possibilities, in the atmosphere of allness around us. Charles Fillmore said divine ideas are humans' inheritance. They're pregnant with possibility because these ideas are the foundation of the cause of all that we could desire. And he says all these ideas contained in the one father/mind are at the mental command of its offspring. He says, get behind a thing into the mental realm where it exists as an inexhaustible idea, and you can draw upon it perpetually and never deplete the source. You think about the power of wisdom. So, in the human experience, where time and space and ideas even are finite, I can't grab hold of and bring into expression every divine idea. That limitation is an aspect of our human incarnation. But what moves me to take hold of any one divine idea rather than another? Well, it's inspiration, it's wisdom, it's intuition, right? So to be inspired is to learn of a divine idea, to catch hold of it, to feel inspired by it, and want it enough to rearrange everything else in my life to make room for it. So Fillmore also said, let it be understood that we're teaching the science of spirit. Those who are receptive to this teaching will be inspired to spiritual consciousness. It's not difficult to accomplish this receiving the breath or inspiration of spirit. So the breath is literally a symbol for inspiration, even as it is materially what we do, right? That we take a breath, we inhale, we inspire, right? So while it's possible to describe inspiration and to even experience it, it can't be processed entirely by our intellect because it's a mystical experience of alignment with a divine idea. You know what I'm saying? It's the starting place. Inspiration is the starting place for creativity, for creating in the world. So, how to catch a snowflake, right? This title came from me. It inspired by my son Adrian when he was 4 years old, and we moved from Honolulu, where he was born, to Omaha, Nebraska, where we were going to live for turned out 17 years. And Adrian encountered his first snowfall. Before then, he had only seen snow on Sesame Street, right? And so he wanted to do what Sesame Street showed him to do when it snowed in Omaha. He went outside, sat on what do you call it, a swing in the yard, and stuck his tongue out to catch snowflakes on his tongue. That's what he had seen, right? So I love this image in my own mind for, taking hold of divine ideas, how to catch that snowflake. So, falling snowflakes, just like stars in the night sky or grains of sand on the shoreline, they represent abundance, don't they? Infinity. So turn your thoughts just for a moment to a time when you experienced awe in the presence of abundance. I remember that sitting on the beach years ago when I only had to go on I had to go on vacation if I was going to see the beach, which is why we live here now where I can go to the beach and always be on vacation, right? But sitting on the shoreline, I took a handful of sand in my hand and I realized I could sit here till the end of my human life and never count all the grains of sand in my hand, let alone on the whole shore. I had this moment of like transcendent bliss in that awareness. So think about that. Jesus' kingdom of the heavens. And just like snowflakes, no two divine ideas are identical, and no two of them, even if you and I took the same divine idea, what gets expressed would be unique to us, to our own sense of what it means and what we can do with it, right? But each one provides the substance of creativity. So what happens when I catch a snowflake? Well, whether it's on in my hand or on my tongue, as soon as a snowflake lands, it changes form, doesn't it? It no longer looks like it looked when it was floating, right? It's there to be shaped and molded to conform to your vision. Hmm. So I think about this. I like to practice, catching divine ideas. The simple practice is to pay attention, right? Pay attention to your desires, to what you're curious about, what you're longing for, right? Notice fresh possibilities, some ideas that might be familiar and resurgent or totally unexpected and novel. An example might be, to go for that college degree that I'd put off for years and years, starting to think that I'm too old for that, right? And then, of course, the next part of the practice is to breathe life into that idea. Intellectually, to look at it, to research it and plan. Emotionally, to feel it out. How do I feel when I imagine myself with that diploma in hand, right? For example, right? And spiritually, does the idea thrill me? Does it give me a sense of greater vitality? Does it inspire me? And of course, if I can get through that, recognizing it, breathing life into it, exploring it, now I can embody that divine idea. So once I've been inspired and got all the logistics and facts, now I can go for it and fulfill my intention for that degree or for whatever that intention is, right? It's so simple and so beautiful to know that what inspires us, we are fully capable of embodying and bringing to life in the world. Wow. So, one of the most inspiring messages I've gotten from Charles Fillmore, all of his writings, was this. And this comes from the book Prosperity. You can do anything with the thoughts of your mind, they are yours and under your control. You can direct them, coerce them, hush them, or crush them. You can dissolve one thought and put another in its stead. There is no other place in the universe where you are the absolute master. Think about that. Take that with you today. And as a remembrance of this message, I couldn't bring you snowflakes. And I thought I'd leave the sand on the beach. And of course, we're remote here. We're not face to face because I did have something I would have loved to hand out to all of you as another representation for divine ideas. And it is this. It is a canister of bubbles. Bubbles. Think about bubbles just like snowflakes. When it lands in your hand, that unique bubble, it immediately changes form. You might see little spots of liquid, or it might seem to like vanish altogether. But this is just another reminder that we command that when it lands, it becomes ours, right? It becomes ours to shape and form and to bring into expression in our life. And so, may you be inspired. May you feel the force of all the wisdom that isn't just inside you, it is you. It's your greatest, highest voice that's always coming to the forefront based on your curiosity, your interest, your desire, your longing, all those feelings that propel your evolution. So I hope you're full of inspiration today and one more time. Happy day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Linda. That's for your wonderful take on wisdom and examples, and your wonderful laugh, smile, and just it was good, and the
Oh,
whole um, mind, idea, expression of the way things can work, and your practical take on it. Thank you, thank you.
you're welcome. You're welcome.